In this video, I will be creating an Elvish Druid in preparation for the two specialization classes one can select from the player's handbook. Druid is another spellcasting class, but with a twist. They act more like a blend of clerical and wizardry style of spellcasting. They pray to acquire their spells, much like a cleric, but they also have many offensive options available, similar to a wizard. The main difference, however, is that their spells generally manipulate nature in some way, shape, or form. Another benefit is that they're one of the few classes that can shapeshift, specifically into natural beasts, such as wolves and bears, and at higher levels into flying creatures, such as eagles or falcons. The specialization classes are called circles, and you get to choose one of them at level 2. The two options that are initially provided by the player's handbook are called the Circle of the Land and the Circle of the Moon, and they differ in their overall roles. The Druids of the Circle of the Land act more like advisors to those who worship nature, and they also safeguard ancient knowledge through oral traditions. While the Druids of the Circle of the Moon, on the other hand, act more like guardians of the land itself. They will wreak havoc on those who wish it harm. So with that, let's begin the process of actually creating our first character within the Druidic class. I'm going to click on this PCs button here and access the Character Wizard. That will open up this window here that I've got right here. What I'm going to choose in this case is an elf of the Highborn race. And because I've already acquired Elvish and Common, I'm going to make sure that I choose Halfling in this case. And because I've selected the High Elven subrace, if you will, I'm going to choose a cantrip. I actually get that as part of one of its benefits. So I'm going to select Firebolt. One of the advantages of selecting the Elvish race in this particular case is I'm also gaining access to weapons that I normally wouldn't acquire being a druid. And as we can see, I have access to longbows, longswords, shortbows, and short swords. And for those of you who do not know, the racial traits that give you these proficiencies do trump the class that you're choosing, which means you get to keep those. Additionally, because we have selected the Elvish race, we have acquired the ability to see up to 60 feet in the dark, and we have also gained Perception as a skill. We have a couple of traits that have been provided by the Elvish race, that is the Fey Ancestry and the Trance feature, or trait. But at the same time, our High Elvish selection has given us the ability to cast a cantrip. So with the race selected, let's move on to the stats. In the case of a druid, the two primary stats that you want to focus on first are your wisdom and your constitution. Your wisdom primarily for your spellcasting capabilities, and your constitution for being able to maintain concentration on those spells. Constitution also plays a key role in your shapeshifting capabilities in some cases, so you want to make sure that that is very high. The third most critical stat that you'll want to look at is your intelligence score, and the reason for that is that you are a spellcaster. As a result, you're going to be slinging a large number of spells. Now, while wisdom is your spellcasting ability score, if you will, your intelligence is also one of your saving throw proficiencies, so you want to make sure that that is a high enough value to be able to add a decent bonus to your saving throws. Another ability score that you will want to consider is your charisma, specifically if you're going to choose the Circle of the Land class specialization. And the reason for that is you're going to be making a lot of persuasion rolls, and charisma affects your persuasion modifier. So having that as high as possible will ensure that you'll succeed more frequently. By default, when you switch to the ability score screen, the option that it has chosen for your ability score selection is the standard array. It's one of the options that you have available to you in the 5th edition rule set. There are a few others. There's the manual entry capability. If you've already rolled them through another method and the DM has approved them, you get to put them in here. There's the point buy system, which I generally don't tend to use. I don't find you can get any decent stats out of them as a result of that. So for any campaign that I'm running, I will allow my players, or any campaign that I want to play in, hopefully I have the option to make use of the dice roll feature. The reason for that is you end up with a much wider range of random values for your overall stats. And because of that randomness, the player is sort of encouraged to roleplay a little bit more rather than just rely 100% on the stats that they have. I mean, when you think about it, you're playing Dungeons & Dragons. The whole reason you're playing Dungeons & Dragons is for the role-playing side of it, right? So with that, I'm going to choose the dice roll here, and hopefully I get a decent roll. Now, as you can see, it has already taken care of dropping the lowest value on each of these dice rolls. Interesting. Okay, so let's see what have I got. Not an overly good set of rolls, and for the purposes of this video, I actually need higher rolls, so I'll be right back once I get a decent set. It's kind of funny. If I had continued recording, I would not have gotten this good of a roll. But because I had stopped recording, the very next roll I did came up with this, which is a pretty decent value there. So all I did was hit this re-roll button here, and as you can see, I only had to do it one additional time, and that's the roll that I ended up coming up with. So I'm going to swap these around a little bit here, and I will show you how I do that. So I finished swapping everything around, and all I did is I used these arrows here to move the values back and forth. So if you see here, I've moved the 12 to strength. If I click this, I move it back to dexterity. Now, if you've got a value where you want it and you end up moving another value through it, they're going to swap position. So you got to remember to swap them back if you do in fact run into that situation. Okay, so I have set everything up here. As you can see, I've set up my wisdom to be an 18. I'm going to make use of a 16 for my charisma and my intelligence. As my constitution. Because I'm gaining a +1 to my intelligence, I'm also getting a 16 in my intelligence. Due to the elvish attribute changes, I'm also gaining +2 to my dexterity, which brings my dexterity up to a 14, leaving my 10 as the only low value, if you will, in the whole stat. Now I could potentially just switch these two around, and then I've got a character that has pretty much very decent stats across the board. In fact, actually, I think I'll do that. There's no risk to me not doing this. With the stats now done, all I have to do is hit this next button or click on this class button in order to get to the actual class screen. And we are doing a druid. And one of the things that you're going to have to do right off is choose your proficiency skills. So we've already got perception. I'm going to be going with the sage background for this particular character because I'm leaning it towards the circle of the land class specialization right now. And as a result, I am also going to be acquiring Arcana and History through that particular background. So I don't want to select Arcana or History, which I don't even think is an option right here, in this option. I still want to select two additional ones that I think I'm going to be able to take advantage of. So with that, I'm going to go with Nature and Religion. And when I drop the background into place, we'll see that the other two will appear there. And as we can see here, we are a Druid level 1. So that is everything we need to do for the class screen. Now the background is the next thing that you'll want to do, and in this case I want to select Sage. And that's going to give me 2 language options. So by the time this character is done, I'm going to have a total of 5 languages. That's nice. I think I'll take Draconic. And it's always hard choosing a language. Let's go with Sylvan. That way I can talk to other Elvish races that don't necessarily speak Elvish itself. Now, at this point, we could potentially save this particular character. We've applied the background, we've applied the class, we've already got our stats set up, and we have gotten our race selected. We haven't set a name, but we still have the option to actually save the character. And the reason being is that you can change that name inside of the class sheet itself. But one of the things I do like to take advantage of is the ability to select spells here. The reason for that is it tells you right off the start as to what it is you'll be able to select. That used to not work, but thankfully Smiteworks has fixed this. So, with that in mind, I'm going to choose 2 cantrips. I'm going to choose that one. You're manipulating nature is essentially what you're doing. And guidance. Alright, so I've chosen my cantrips, and I'm going to switch to level 1. Yeah, let's take Cure Light Wounds, or Cure Wounds rather. I keep forgetting that 5th edition has gotten rid of the word light in front of the wounds part there. Entangle. Good berry for food. Healing Word is always useful. And Purify Food. Okay. Well, I didn't really take anything that was doing any damage here. So I'm going to take Thunder Wave actually. So I'm going to get rid of this one. And as you can see, I gain 1 spell back. There we go. Okay. So that is everything that I need to do for the spells. The last thing I need to do, or want to do rather, is set up my inventory. In your class sheet, you're going to find a number of things available to you, specific to your starting equipment. So under your proficiency section here, you will see all of the things that you as a druid will be proficient in. And as you can see, long swords and short swords and longbows and shortbows are not part of this list. You still have them in this list of proficiencies, though, because of the fact that your race is providing those. And I believe there is actually a limit as to how many items can be displayed here, because the short sword and the long sword, the short sword and the short bow, wow, I can't speak today, have disappeared from this list. All right. In addition, you will also find a section for equipment. But there are two locations for your equipment. The first is going to be on your class sheet. The next is going to be on your background sheet, which is why I didn't get rid of this. And you will find this particular paragraph here called equipment. In fact, we don't need that there for now. And this is going to be all of the options in addition to what you get here for what you receive for your starting equipment. So in this case, I'm actually going to take advantage of the fact that any simple weapon is an option here. Now, unfortunately, it could be a simple melee weapon or it can be a simple ranged weapon. It cannot be the longsword. So in order for my character to start with a longsword, I have to convince the DM that it's something I should have, or I go buy one as one of the first things that I do when I start in a city or get to a city of some kind. I do, however, have the ability to choose the scimitar. And that actually works fairly well in relation to a starting weapon. For a simple melee weapon, I am going to choose a quarterstaff. I'm just going to drop that into place. I will select scimitar, and that'll be under the martial weapons. Now, it could be argued that instead of taking the scimitar, you could actually take the longsword, and that's how you would work with a dungeon master in order to actually convince him that you want to be able to do that. In this case, I will start with the scimitar. Leather armor, an explorer's pack, and a druidic. So you're getting all three of these things. You're not just getting one of them. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to go to armor, roll down until I see leather, and throw that into place. An explorer's pack is going to be under gear. There. And a druidic focus. Now, druidic focus, if you search for focus here, you're not going to find anything. And it's not going to show up under either of these. The easiest way to figure out what you have for a druidic focus is to go under your adventuring gear option. And you will see a header here called druidic focus. And then you can choose one of these. And that will actually show up in this list. So let's say let's give it a U wand. And that is everything that we have to worry about here from the class sheet. So let's close this and take a look at this. All right, so let's see. Do I have an ink bottle? One ink. Yes. Okay. Quill. Nope. So we'll call it an ink pen then. Knife. Now, this option here, a letter from a dead colleague posing a question you have not had a chance to be able to answer, that is actually just a random item that you have to go through and create. As a dungeon master, it actually kind of makes a little bit more sense to use an item that already exists and just simply change its name. So, scroll, for example. You're not going to find that there, but this is a case for a scroll. So let's go with paper. Let's see. Paper? Yes. Okay, so there's one sheet of paper. So if you drag the paper in, I just simply a letter from Tom, for example. And if you want to, you can actually go through and pop that item open and put the contents of that letter there. And that would actually link directly back to the role-playing aspect of Dungeons & Dragons. Okay, in addition, we need to look for a set of common clothes. So let's pop that open. Nope, that's costume. Oops, I missed. And a belt pouch. So belt pouch, and you'll notice that there's no place here to put your starting gold. And I'm not sure why, because this is the total cost of what you're spending. And actually, if you look through my videos, I'm pretty close to this value pretty much across the board. So they've balanced that out pretty well. But there's no place to actually put in that you're receiving 10 gold pieces. We have to do that once we actually get to the character sheet, which we should be able to get here in a moment. And with that, this character is pretty much ready to go. We don't have any feats to choose from simply because of the fact that this is a first level character. You're not going to be able to get a feat until you are creating a 4th level character, or when you get to 4th level or higher, in most cases. So generally we can simply ignore that. Now I'm going to call this a Druid. Oops. And then hit save to actually go through and create this character. And as you can see, it pops open this character sheet. However, right from the start, there's something that is already missing. If you look on your class sheet at this saving throw section, you will notice that you aren't proficient in those 2 saving throws. So in this case, it's wisdom and intelligence. All you have to do to fix that is enable the star that is over here on the bottom right side of the numerical screen. And that gives you your proficiency bonus. So if you look, it's a +3 without the proficiency bonus, +5 with. And in case of the wisdom, it's a +4 without the proficiency bonus, and a +6 with the proficiency bonus. One of the other things that we used to have to go through and actually fix up was the number of spell slots that your character was starting with. In this particular case, it has now been fixed from the looks of things, so you don't have to worry about that. So really, all I have to do is actually set up a portrait here. So I'm just going to pop that open. All I did is left-clicked on that. I'm going to go to 5e. I've selected elf. There you are. And there are a few options in here. So let's look for Druid. Bards, Druids. Still haven't decided whether I'm going to go with male or female, but it really doesn't matter in this particular case. Yeah, it would be kind of odd for a high elf to be that portrait there. I'm going to go with this one. Mainly because it's shown the spellcasting ability here. Oops. I keep forgetting all I have to do is just select it. So with the portrait set, let's take a quick look over your character sheet. The first page here is where all of your main stats are going to be. That's your ability scores, your saving throws, your passive perception, which is what this is, your senses, in this case you get to see 60 feet in the dark. You have no special moves or no special defenses that come into play, and you've got your hit points down here. You have your class, your background, and your race here, and your character name and your portrait and token here. The skills page shows you all of the skills that you are proficient and not proficient in. You do still get to use all of these skills. Just some of them you get a bonus in. That's really what the difference is. For ability scores, abilities, these are the features that you're starting off with. And I'm going to pop some of these open so that I can review them briefly before we actually continue going forward. So pop that open. We've already got the cantrip, so Fey Ancestry and Trance. Pop those open. And then all of the proficiencies are also listed here. And as you can see, all of the proficiencies that we have gained as both the racial traits and our class are listed here. And that's quite a complete list. That's a nice list. And then all of our languages. Finally, we have our inventory sheet. And you'll note that the Explorer's Pack is not in this list. And that's the reason for that is that this backpack and several of these items that are here kind of exploded out of that to fill up your character sheet, if you will. So when you drop the Explorer's Backpack into your inventory sheet, it's actually a container, if you will, that expands out to all of the items that are within it. And that includes this backpack. One of the things I recommend a player do is to organize the contents of their character sheet. So anything that you think will be inside of your backpack, for example, just add it to your backpack. And as you can see, it indents that item so that it shows it's inside of another item. And I'll show you why you want to do that. Just let me throw a few items into the backpack so that we have, that's worn, mess kit. Interesting, it didn't take the name that we had set that. Okay. There we go. And let's see. Now, in relation to a water skin, some people will put that on their belt. Some people will put it in their backpack. It really doesn't make a difference. And in the case of weapons, you could go so far as to being specific as to what hand it's in. So, for example, the quarterstaff here could be on a sling that's over your back so that it's sort of in its own little sheath, if you will, and you're carrying it straddled across your back while you're holding your scimitar in your belt and the wand in your left hand, for example. So you can be a little bit more specific. Now, you'll notice that all of these items sorted to the point where they're alphabetically listed as being shown inside of the backpack. And the reason that does that is this acts as a container when you put it as a location. So one of the things you can do if, let's say you're going to swim through a lake and you don't want all of this stuff to get wet, you just simply take your backpack off and all the items that are in it go with it. You don't have to worry about that. In addition, when you do that, your encumbrance will drop. So you see there, I'm not carrying the backpack. I'm currently carrying 22 pounds. The minute I put the backpack on, I'm now carrying 81 pounds. So it's a very quick way to reduce your overall encumbrance. The next tab, the notes, is literally where you can go and input some information about your character. Essentially, this is where you get to provide your own personal customizations to it. What gender you're going to use if you're dealing with genders, the age of your character, the height of the character, how much they weigh, their alignment, whether they're lawfully neutral, chaotic good, etc., etc. A deity depends entirely in the world that you're in. For a lot of people who play within the Forgotten Realms world, and that's generally where the players that I run through tend to sit, if you will, when it comes to their campaigns, there's a large selection of gods that they can put there. And generally, you will choose the god that aligns most with your alignment and the interest that you personally have with that particular god. So, Mystra, for example, would be a god that you would align for anybody who's deals with magic quite a bit. So, theoretically, a druid could become a patron of Mystra. Generally, they don't, but it could be argued that they could. Finally, these personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, you can fill them in with whatever information that you want, but at the same time, your background page offers you the ability to make use of these tables here, if you will. And you can simply just pop them open, roll it, and if you like it, I am horribly, horribly awkward in social situations. Wow, that sounds an awful lot like me. And just drop that into place. That's all you have to do. And all I did is I left-clicked and dragged it over into there. And then the appearance, generally I recommend my players put in information that you would use to describe your character to other people that you're meeting. That way you don't have to remember every single time, you just simply read it off. And finally, the notes field here is literally just so that you can keep notes about your character. That's all it's for. This log table, not something that you will generally have to worry about unless you're starting to going through what are known as league adventures. And a dungeon master will populate this with all of the adventures you had successfully gone through for your character. And that acts as a treatise, if you will, of what your character has been through and whether you qualify for the next level of those league adventures. And then finally, your actions tab. This is the page you will see most often outside of the main page. And the reason I say that is this is where all of your spells are. This is where all of your weaponry is. And all of these options, and I don't know why it's still doing that, all of these options are typically what you will be using in a spellcasting scenario or a combat situation. So if you're thrown into a combat tracker, chances are you're going to be opening up this particular tab for your character. Now, as a result of the race and class that we have chosen, we have a couple of things here that we'll want to take a brief look at. So I'm going to close out that. We don't need that anymore. Interesting. I have no idea why it has opened up the same trait when I clicked and opened that up. And for those of you who didn't notice that, all I did was clicked on the traits for the race, and it opened up the same thing for both of those. So the other way that I can get at those is to simply click on the high elf, and then click on, that's the image for the elf. That's going to give me the Fey Ancestry and the Trance capability here. So even though I have selected the High Elf subrace, it still opens the Elvish base race. And the reason being is you can get to the subrace here. So what I need to actually open up is Fey Ancestry and Trance. And then we'll start covering these. So the first one I'm going to cover is Fey Ancestry. And the reason I'm going to cover that is that it has an actionable option here. And the reason why I say that is because you are essentially resistant, or I shouldn't say resistant, you have advantage to saving throws against being charmed. Well, you're going to want to be able to take advantage of that in an easy way. An easy way to do that is add this to an actions tab here. So I'm just going to drop this into place. And this is the Elvish, so I'm just going to call it an elf group. Now, the good thing is you have the ability of saving against a charm spell. Unfortunately, however, this effect, if you will, isn't set up right. Now, admittedly, you do have two options. You could make things a little bit easier for you by creating an effect here to give you an advantage on a saving throw. And you could do something like this. Oops, let me edit in the right field here. Semicolon, ADV, save, and then just get rid of that. And the reason why is because now when you put this on your character, and it should be on self, and it should expire on next roll, what'll happen is that you will gain advantage to that saving throw. So you as the player should realize that someone is casting a charm spell on you. You can make advantage roll with that attack. So if I select this, and let me quickly drop this character into the combat tracker on my Dungeon Master screen. Pop this open. Now, I don't have anything here that's going to be a saving throw. I don't think any, actually, you might, the succubus might. So if I click this effect right now, you'll see that I have an advantage on my saving throw related to the Fey Ancestry trait. So let's have a look here on the succubus side. Ah, she does have a charm. So I'm going to target, yoink, and then cast. So you'll see here, it rolled 2 dice. And I succeeded in that saving throw. The other method that we could have used is simply to click on this advantage button here, and while it is red, simply roll a d20 in the chat box. Ooh, nice, I rolled a 20. And that still would have created an advantage saving throw. So those are the two options that you could potentially do to make that roll. What about the second capability here? And magic can't put you to sleep. Well, you can't set up an effect to make yourself immune to one specific spell. So the other option is to simply remind the Dungeon Master, if they're casting a sleep spell, that you are immune to it. And if they go, hey, what? Just simply click on that and drag this into place so that they can actually see it. And that's all you have to do for Fey Ancestry. All right, so let's close this and take a look at Trance. This is pretty much simply an ability that your character is going to have because we have chosen the elvish race. Elves don't require sleep, and they don't require a full 8 hours of rest. So if you have an elf in your party, they can generally cover 2 watches if you're camping, for example. Or if you've set up a watch order and you're in some location that you're not necessarily camping, but at the same time you're not necessarily in an inn of some kind or in a place that you consider safe. They will go into a trance for 4 hours of a day, and they will acquire essentially the equivalent of 8 hours of rest time, which gives them the ability to study the spells that they need for the remaining duration of the rest period, if they aren't in the process of going through and actually taking 2 watches. Now, an elf is one of the few races that can still do 2 watches and still have the time required to be able to acquire any spells, either through pray for the case of the druid, studying their spell book in the case of wizard, etc., etc. So we don't really need to do anything for this particular capability. Spellcasting, however, is one of your main features, and we'll want this table open here as we continue to level this character up. So that will become more applicable once we hit level 2, which will be in the next video. And the reason for that is that level 2 is where we acquire our class specialization, so I'm not going to be covering anything higher than level 1 with this particular setup today. And we've already gone through and set up all of our known cantrips, except for the fact that the starting cantrip is not here. So we did choose Firebolt, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to go to Spells. Interesting. Did I spell it wrong? Yes, I did. It's 2 words. So I will mention that that didn't get saved when the character was created. So that's something that they'll probably want to fix. Okay. And what else? If, however, you need to understand details about how many spells you will be able to study or prepare, and Druids are one of these classes that does need to go through and prepare the spells that they want to be able to cast throughout the course of the day. They don't necessarily need to select all of the spells that you have here, but you do have the option to choose up to your level plus your wisdom bonus, I do believe, with a wisdom of 16. For example, here we go. Yeah, so wisdom modifier plus your druid level. So in this case, we have the ability to prepare 5 spells. And the reason for that is that our wisdom is giving us a +4 bonus, and our level is giving us 1 spell, so that means we have a total of 5 spells that we can prepare. Now, every rest, you will have to select and deselect spells if you're looking to switch them out. So let's say we had the ability of knowing, say, 8 spells here, but we can only prepare 5 of them. Then there's 3 spells that you have as backup spells that you can't cast if you haven't prepared them. So the only way that you can switch those out is during a long rest. And all you do is you uncheck one that you currently have prepared and check another one that you want to choose. So it gives you the option to choose an entirely different set of spells throughout the course of the day, as long as you've taken a rest when you do so, a long rest specifically. Now, the reason why at the beginning of the video I stated that druids are very similar in clerics in how they acquire their spells, because they have to prepare each morning during a long rest, or each evening during a long rest, to list the spells that they're going to use the next day. And they pray to get those spells. Well, when you pray to acquire those spells, you can actually choose any spell from your actual spell list here, what options that you can choose here, based on the total number of spells that you can cast. So, and what I mean by that is by level. So if you have the ability to cast 2nd level spells, you could potentially theoretically pull out 5 level 2 spells and not prepare any level 1 spells at all. And you can pull it right from the actual spell list here. You don't necessarily have to have it in a spell book of any kind. You're praying for your spells. So you can pray that today I would like to have Beast Sense and Find Traps and Flaming Sphere, as long as you have the ability to cast level 2 spells. We won't get that until 3rd level. So at 1st level, we only have the ability to cast 1st level spells. But remember, as we level up, we have the ability to take our Wisdom modifier and our level, combine those two to gain or to set up the number of spells that we can prepare. So at level 2, we'll be able to prepare 6 spells. At level 3, we'll be able to prepare 7 spells, etc., etc., etc. If at a later point in time, when we hit level 4, and I believe level 4 is when we acquire our first ability score modifier, yep, then I will have the ability to potentially add 2 points to my existing wisdom, giving me an extra preparation slot, because I will now have a +5 to my wisdom bonus when I take that from level 8 or from 18 that it is now to a 20. So you can increase the total number of spells that you can prepare throughout the course of the day, but you don't have to actually have a spell book with them all written down. You get to choose which ones you want to select at the time that you're praying for them. So that's why I say Druids work very similar in the way that a cleric does, because they do the exact same thing. Wizards, on the other hand, they require them to be written down in their spell book, and they can only choose spells that are in that list. You get to choose any spell you want out of your entire suite of spells that you can have available to you, as long as you have the ability to cast the level you're looking at. That's it. So with that, the last thing I'd like to take a look at here is Researcher. So Researcher is one of those role-playing traits that you acquire from your background, and it is extremely useful for someone who's in an advisory role. And the reason why I say that is because you can, if you don't immediately know the information offhand, you're asking the DM, hey, does my character know this particular information offhand? The DM says no. You can tell the DM, well, okay, if that's the case, then I know where I should be able to go find it. And the DM is going to tell you exactly where that is. So it might be a library on the other side of the continent. Well, then you have a quest to go to that library. Gee, it's amazing how that works, huh? Anyway, so that's what this comes into play, or where this comes into play. It is very useful. I know I've used it extensively in the past, much to the chagrin of my DM, and it has pretty much allowed me to acquire the information that we were looking for as a party without really having to go through the entire quest line that party was quote unquote supposed to go through, which is why the DM hated me. But I digress. So Researcher, it's one of those things that you essentially roleplay. You can link it to your adventures, or sorry, your actions tab here, but generally all you're going to be doing is coordinating with the DM, and you just simply go, okay, I'm going to be making use of my Researcher ability, just drop it into there. So you don't necessarily have to have it in your actions tab to be able to drop it into here, but they're still going to want to potentially be able to look at it. So that is everything with one exception. So let's see, do we get to choose our ability to shape change just yet? No, that is when we hit level 2. So when we hit that level, I will explain the ability to change shape. So with that, this character is ready to go. We don't have to do anything else unless you want to acquire a token from the Dungeon Master, and they're going to be the ones that give that to you. I'm not sure why, but Fantasy Grounds will not provide tokens to the client side based on what the DM has in their list. It frustrates me to no end. But anyway, so that is everything that we have to go over when it comes to the first level Druid. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.